There's a new set. When I first started this channel, I wanted to share my progress with what I did with learning computers and a little bit of tech repair, a little bit of programming. But starting this channel, I really just kind of jumped in without thinking about it. I just jumped in head first. And I knew that it was going to bring new skills, a little bit of video editing and kind of filming, maybe some photo edits and some audio, a lot of things. But one thing that I took for granted was how difficult it would be for the photo editing to create thumbnails. And even though it's not my normal content, I want to walk you through how I make my thumbnails today. Admittedly, thumbnails were a lot more complicated than what I thought they were going to be. I thought, hey, it's an image, it's a little bit of photo editing, how hard can it be? You know, you just slap some stuff together and that's fine. But quickly what I found out was that to create thumbnails that seem to satisfy the YouTube algorithm, I really needed to do things like background removal and a little bit of kind of color correction and that sort of thing. And so I really wanted to share with you some of the tools that I use and kind of the workflow that I use to get that done. Really what I needed was I needed something that was quick and convenient as possible. I needed something that was cheap. Really, I didn't want to start buying a whole bunch of extra software and subscriptions and that sort of thing, so that immediately cut out what I thought was the majority of Photoshop. And then I also needed something easy. I didn't want to be fighting devices and fighting network shares and fighting having to use different peripherals and whatever might come. I didn't know what there was, but I didn't want to create a whole bunch of friction to the process. I needed a workflow that really worked naturally at each step along the way. So what this means is that I knew that I needed a bit more equipment than what I had on hand. I knew that I was going to need a light. I originally started just by taking shots from my desk sitting in the chair. It seemed to make sense. I film almost all of these videos from my desk directly in front of my computer and monitors and everything, so I might as well go ahead and take the picture for my thumbnails from the same exact spot. So I started there, but I didn't have anything behind me like this backdrop. And what it meant was that when I got to the point to cut out the background, I started running into a lot of issues because there wasn't a uniform color behind me to use any sort of automatic tool that could just remove everything. There was a whole bunch of color and a whole bunch of different variation to the image, so it made it really difficult unless I was using those high-end tools that I was trying to avoid to begin with. I come in, turn on the light, I bring this backdrop into kind of this little dining area slash kitchen. In case you haven't noticed, I'm filming everything for this channel inside of a one-bedroom apartment. And so what I've done is I've turned the like breakfast nook, almost dining room area into my office. So it works really well if I'm not doing anything, but as soon as I started filming, what I found out was that it kind of spills over into the kitchen. And then from there, I use my phone as my main camera. It's a really easy to start using a channel for that. Phones now have gotten to the point where you can use them for cameras and video cameras, and unless you really need the extra image capabilities of a mirrorless or a DSLR or something, for most part, your phone is going to manage really, really well for that. So what I do is basically set up my phone on a tripod. I've got the backdrop here, I set up the lights, I take the image, and then from there, I transfer the image over to my iPad. Then once it's in the iPad, I open the image in something called Photoshop Mix. Now, like I said before, I wanted to avoid Photoshop because I didn't want to pay for anything extra, especially when I was brand new to this whole photo editing process. I didn't want to get stuck paying $15 or $30 or $40 or $50 a month for something that I was still learning how to use and not getting a whole lot of value out. What I found out was that Adobe is putting out several minimal versions of Photoshop almost, and they're going to the App Store. And so for this particular one, Photoshop Mix, it's a dumbed down version of Photoshop, and I use it on my iPad, and it's basically, it offers me just enough functionality to be able to remove the background from images. And while it's not as feature complete as something like complete Photoshop would be, it's just enough because it beats out all of the lower quality, lower end background removal apps that are out there, and you typically have to upload a picture or something like that and it's kind of hands off. I really wanted something that I could control the workflow of it. So I open Photoshop Mix, I import the picture into there, and I use the cutout feature to draw around or draw an outline around what it is that I'm trying to remove the background from and take care of it from in there. Then once that's done, I save the image, upload into Canva, and if you've used Canva before, you probably can, it's just enough for me to not do something that's over the top that I can only do in Photoshop, but it's definitely enough for me to use their free features and get by and start playing with things. Now, if you're saying, Darren, that's great, but I don't have a fancy iPad and the pencil and all that sort of thing. So, you know, how can I really use this process if you don't have all these fancy tools, and especially if you claim that this was supposed to be cheap and easy? Well, before I had this iPad or the iPhone 12 that I'm shooting on, really I just had an old Android phone. And so the process was still the same, but it was just slightly tweaked a little bit. So I would still set up my lighting, I would still set up my background, and I would just take my other phone, it was an older, I think it was a Google Pixel 3a, I would still set it up on a little bitty tripod, take the picture and load it into my PC, but instead of going through Photoshop Mix and various apps, I would just load it into GIMP. And if you've never heard of GIMP, it's basically like an open source alternative to Photoshop. It's really great software, but it's really deep, so if you don't know it, you really quickly, there's kind of a steep learning curve. It's not impossible. There's definitely a whole bunch of videos online and a bunch of resources to go learn it, but I didn't want to take the time to do that, to learn this complete whole new toolbox of photo editing software. And so that's why I've stepped away from it now. But GIMP has a free select tool and has all the layering techniques and capabilities that you can still use to remove the background and all that you need, and you can basically still get the same thing done directly on your PC completely for free. And from there, it's the same as the rest of the second half of the process that I have, which is just load it into Canva, add your graphics and your text however you want, and from there you upload it to YouTube or do whatever it is that you need to do with it. So that's the video for today. I really hope that this helps you. Again, I'm just trying to share my progress, and there was enough here that I wanted to share just in case it could help somebody else out. If you've got any comments or suggestions, please leave them down in the comments below. I'll try to add a link to everything that I mentioned in the description. Remember to go ahead and give this video a like or subscribe if you want more of what you've seen here. And until next time, keep building.